Hi, my name is Greg Canty, and I'd like to welcome you to the Win Happy podcast. I love chatting to people from all walks of life about their lives and their careers, about the choices they make along the way to pursue their happiness, and what winning actually means to them. I hope you enjoy these conversations as much as I do. Thanks for listening. Today I am absolutely broken-hearted to hear the passing of our friend Micheál Sheridan of the Mercy Hospital Foundation. We hadn't been in touch in quite a while, and despite the connected world we live in today, I didn't even realise that he had been sick. My sincere condolences to his family and friends, who I hope will take some comfort from the huge difference that he made to us while he was with us. Micheál was one of the very early guests of the Win Happy podcast, and this is the recording of our conversation back in October 2018. Micheál, you gentlemen, thank you for the friendship. We will all miss you. Let's hear that conversation with Micheál. Hi, in this episode of the Fusion Win Happy podcast, we talk to the Cavan man, Micheál Sheridan, CEO of the Mercy Hospital Foundation. Micheál talks about being professional, but also taking things personally and finding the balance between those things. He talks about a recent life-changing experience at a Roger Waters concert, where we were all encouraged to resist and to call out rubbish wherever we see it. Micheál shares his personal and his professional story, including his early days working on the family farm, senior roles with the ISPCC, and he also talks about his current role with the Mercy Hospital Foundation. Micheál talks passionately about the work that's been done at the hospital and also the new cancer care centre, which hopefully will be built soon. I hope you enjoy the show. Thanks for listening. Micheál, how you doing?
Greg.
So Micheál Sheridan, CEO of the Mercy Hospital Foundation, a good friend. Good to see you.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
Good. Yeah.
Resist, Micheál.
Yeah, we were just talking about Roger Waters and that gig in Dublin a few months ago.
How did you describe it to me?
Or a religious experience.
Yeah. What are you talking about? I was there. I know exactly what it was. But
I suppose I've been listening to Pink Floyd, and we were just saying a few minutes ago, I probably started listening to them after I bought the posters in college. And just the imagery sort of drew me to the music, because clearly there was message in the imagery and that transferred across. And yeah, I've just been listening to the music all along, and then, when I saw that he was playing in Dublin, my only regret is I bought tickets for one night. I really should have bought them for both. But yeah, it's just one of those situations where you just have a feeling inside you, like a fire.
It's like a fire
burning,
an inferno.
Yeah, like the good thing was we were all probably in our 40s, 50s and 60s when we were released, so the energy levels to do something after the gig weren't there, But it was just, it's just phenomenal. It's the message in the music. It's calling it when you see it. It's being honest. It's not accepting things that you're unhappy with. And it's calling it out, and it's addressing it. And just the music is phenomenal. That night, the symbolism, the imagery, the colour.
The big messaging.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think, like yourself, if I was to sum up my feeling coming away from that gig, it was kind of like, it was anger, but it was like a positive anger. I think our clear message was, where you see bullshit, you need to call it out. Because we've kind of become very, very soft and very passive and don't upset anyone and just accept things as they are.
Yeah, and I wonder sometimes if that's, a human thing or an Irish thing. Like, I often find that you find yourself sometimes having to put a lid on it. Now, that might be because your role, sometimes it's easier not to say it because, the fallout of what you say might be greater than the return you get from calling it out. So I think, the lessons I've learned are, you can call it out and get angry. The question then is, do you act impulsively, or do you kind of think of a way to fix the problem without necessarily causing chaos as you go? And I think that's just something you learn through life is, that you can find a way maybe to make those changes. You got to bring people with you.
Yeah.
So maybe, being angry and being upset. But I think then what I've learned definitely from experience is you then need to frame that in a solution where you can try and turn those people maybe who are part of the problem, maybe bring them with you, or at least heighten their awareness that things could be better. And, certainly in the environment that I work in, you see that every day. You see where there are huge problems. There are solutions, but if you just ride in there with, your cannons blazing, you probably will get nowhere. So sometimes it's in small steps. I think sometimes it's in making a leap of faith as well.
So you were saying this very kind of profound thing to me a few moments ago, about separating professional from personal. What do you think, Micheál, with that little concept?
It's a hard one to live through sometimes, but I think, so it's a little bit about, so our experiences in the foundation, we deal a lot with people who are in bad situations. So we've had people who have walked into us and told us that they have a terminal cancer, that they expect not to be around within 12 months, and they want to do something in those 12 months to recognise the care that they've been given in the hospital, show their gratitude. And we then work closely with those people. We meet their families, we have coffee in their houses, we go to the events that they run, and we build a relationship with these people. Now, it might only be a 12-month relationship, but it's sometimes a pretty intense relationship. And then those people pass away. And you've gotten to know their family and their friends, and you've gotten to know them. And the issue can be then that you carry that with you. And if you multiply that out by 20, 30 people in a year, let's just say, you're carrying an awful burden with you.
Okay, and describe that burden.
It can be like the loss of a friend. I mean, I remember about 7 or 8 years ago, a young guy diagnosed with a testicular cancer. He was treated successfully. He became a pal. He's still probably somebody I keep in touch with. And about 2 years after his surgery, he was asked to come back into the hospital because they thought they had seen some shadows on his lungs, which would suggest that his cancer had spread. So he originally had a testicular cancer diagnosis. They thought, at that stage, they were confident they'd removed the cancer. It was localized. But then when these shadows show on your lungs, they have a concern that the cancer maybe wasn't all gone, it had spread. And it was kind of like a buddy had been diagnosed with cancer. He was a guy, same age as me, identified with him. I'd gotten to know him very well, spent time in his house, met his dogs, all that stuff. So then when you hear that, you take a knock and it becomes personal because it's something that's affecting somebody in your social circle. So that's kind of the issue, is that these people get very close to us. And therefore, the more of these people you engage with, the greater the risk always then of having that experience. And it can't always be. Empathy and compassion are absolutely essential in the job that we do at the foundation. But what comes then is the risk of being exposed to people who have an inevitable ending. They pass away because of a terminal cancer. And then how, I or the team in the foundation deal with that on a personal level as individuals. How we deal with it collectively within the office. So like there was one guy from North Cork who fundraised with us, a guy called Gary Walsh. Gary was in his 50s, big, tall, strong guy, diagnosed with an esophageal cancer. And Gary raised a lot of money to help to make improvements that would impact on patients in the medical oncology ward. And then Gary passed away. And what we have on our door in the office is we have Gary's mass card.
Why?
Because he became a friend to the foundation, because he was a big character, because we got to know him and we got to know his family, and because he was just, for a period of time, he was one of us. We also have another mass card for a guy who we first met about 8 years ago, who walked into the foundation office the very day he was diagnosed with cancer. And he told us that he wanted to do things with us. And every year, he would put a team in our golf classic, but he would also stand on the street with a bucket during a collection day. A really unassuming guy, no outward signs of any wealth, just a really good guy. And he was a patient of the hospital for 8 years. And about 2 years ago, we found out that he had passed away. And he left us his estate as a gift in his will. So he has had a massive impact on our ability to make massive changes for cancer patients at the hospital. And again, his card sits on our door because there are people who have fundamentally changed what people in the hospital are able to do for patients who were in the same situation or are in the same situation now as those guys were back then. So, we now have a phrase in the foundation which is through us, not to us. So when people support the hospital like those guys did, or people put €5 in a bucket, they could be given to the person who looked after them in the hospital. Not directly, but because of the lady who brought them their tea. The person who touched the hand of someone who's in intensive care, who's intubated. And all they want is somebody to put their hand on their hand, to know that they're connected back in. So that's what those guys did. And that's why I think we connect with them at a social, personal level. So you then have to find a way to, not saying forget them, but to remember the impact they've had, but also to be able to sometimes just, not saying disconnect, but be able to compartmentalise it and then get on with your other life, which is your home life and your kids and your family and what you do outside of work. Did I come round to it?
Yeah. So what you're describing isn't the ultra professional. It sounds like someone who does take this personally, and I presume part of the deal when you work in the sector that you are, when you're in that role, that just comes with it. Now describe what that professional person in that role looks like.
In general terms, and then in personal terms. In general terms, people who work in the sector, so the sector is kind of split into, if you look at it in two ways. So if you look at any not-for-profit, more than likely they're a service provider, and then there's a part of that organisation that raises money to help that service provision side of the organisation. So you'll have people who are out working with, on the streets, on the front line with homeless people, or people who have mental health issues, or people who are in hospitals. And then you'll have a group of people who are sitting alongside, whose job it is to go out and connect donors with the mission of the organisation. And people who work in that side, so the development, fundraising, philanthropy side of it, come from a variety of backgrounds. I have friends who work in the sector who worked in banking. I have friends who worked in the sector who were in medical sales, people who worked in lots of commercial entities. And then personally, I came straight into the sector from university. So I completed my degree, spent a year in university working as a sabbatical, a student union welfare officer, then saw an opportunity to work with Childline back in about 1996, 1997.
Okay, I'm just going to pause you there for a second. And we're talking about the personal and the professional. Like, I'm guessing that the person who does take on board some of these things personally would be motivated that much more. It's someone who empathizes and know you've got a strong sense of purpose around what you're doing. And the opposite of that personal is someone who's cold and efficient, and I'm just doing a role and I'm processing. So today it could be, raising money for this cause, or tomorrow it could be working for an agricultural company somewhere, doing something, and it doesn't really matter what I'm doing because I'm just a professional, I'm just doing a thing. Yeah, of course, there's a downside. I get accused of taking things personally. Well, actually care, and there's a bit of passion there. And when that fire is burning, what you're talking about, the Roger Waters concert, that fire is a powerful thing. We talk about motivating our teams to do things. I'm sure you don't want anyone coming into your place who's just functioning in a 1, 2, 3 box. And if they are, well, they're probably not going to be the greatest person in that role. And you do need to light fires and, create a bit of passion and give people a sense of purpose and meaning. So maybe we should all talk about, you should be taking it more personally.
Yeah, I would say it's about purpose. I mean, so even in our organisation, we need people who have that ability to be compassionate, to understand where people are coming from. We also need people, though, as well, who, I'm not saying don't have empathy or compassion, but somebody last week, we were talking about fundraising, and you split it into two types. One is cooking and the other is baking. So cooking is try it and see, add a bit, tweak it, taste it, add a bit more, and eventually you get it right. And that's what part of fundraising is. The other part of it is the baking bit, which is, it is a process, it's scientific, there's a way, it's measured, you can measure the impact, you can see what your attrition rates will be. So it's kind of a mix of two. So within fundraising, I think what you need are, you need bakers and you need cookers.
But whether which, if I'm that person overseeing that professional process, that person every single time should be someone who's highly motivated and cares and will take it personally if you don't achieve those goals and you don't raise the money for that thing or whatever. So regardless of what we're doing, I think, let's let's have more passion. So Micheál, I was just looking at your Twitter bio, a dad to 4 future leaders, a hater of begrudgery. I'm kind of liking this fella. I'm not sure if you rewrote that after that concert or whatever. So, complete rewind. Where are you from?
I'm from Cavan. I grew up in a little place called Ballinya, which, when people ask me where it is, it's on the bus route between Granard and Belfast.
Were you in the town or?
No, I grew up on a farm.
Yeah.
So, milked cows when I was 10, 11, 12.
Was that a good thing to be doing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some growing up on a farm is pretty cool. You learn about things growing and
You also get the tap on the window at like 5 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon when it's freezing outside and, you have to do something outside. You dreaded that. You were sitting watching whatever. The match at the time, it used to be on, ITV or UTV with Jim Rosenthal and all those guys. I think it gave all of us, my siblings would probably agree, it gave us all a tremendous work ethic. So my dad ran a farm, plus then worked as well. So he was what's known as an AI man.
What was that?
An artificial inseminator.
Oh yes, okay. Now I get it.
No more detail required.
Yeah.
So my dad did that. He got up in the morning, he milked cows, then got in his car and drove around
AIing,
with his long plastic bags and his washing up liquid.
Yeah.
And then my mum worked full time as well, and then she also was a first aid instructor. So at night she'd either on her own or dad would have to drive her. Would travel sometimes 20 miles or sometimes 50 miles to teach people first aid through the civil defence. So both worked, I wouldn't even say full time. They worked pretty much Monday to Friday, 8 to 11, maybe not even 9 to 5. So that I think gave everyone a grounding in you got to go get it.
So what was that house like? What were the conversations at the dinner table?
I can't even remember. I think most of the time we learned to cook ourselves. It's funny people talk about, we're now parents of 4 kids and, sometimes you feel guilty about being at work and, being home late and all those kind of things. When I was a kid, I didn't even think about that. I don't know if it did me any harm either. It just taught you independence. I remember now, walking or cycling to football training and it was 5 miles away. And nobody batted an eyelid. Yeah. Whereas now, you'd be worried about who's driving past them. Will they get hit by a car? All the things that parents don't worry about. We've changed. Parents, I think, have changed a little bit. We see the world differently. And even I don't know if that's a good thing or not either. But
it's probably even riskier in those days if you think about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
With drink driving and every other kind of thing.
So it was a busy household. But it was lively and as any house with 5 kids in it would be,
Yeah. What was your favourite summer holiday as a kid?
I used to spend a lot of my summers. I often joke, I was probably the first person from Cavan to know how to play hurling because my cousins lived in a little place in South Galway, just on the border with County Clare on the way to Ballyvaughan called Kinvara. Beautiful little town on the south of Galway Bay. I used to spend my summers there. Now it seemed like I spent an eternity there, but again it could have been 2 weeks. And it always seemed like the weather was incredible. But again, that might have been 2 days.
Yeah.
But it was in the foothills of the Burren. Everybody has kind of knows the stone walls of the west of Ireland. My uncle and aunt as well ran a craft shop, a souvenir shop in the local castle there called Dungura Castle. And myself and my cousin, we used to work in the craft shop in the summer selling Aran jumpers and...
How old were you?
Gosh, I was probably 14, 15 maybe. And then they also had a shop in the middle of the town as well. And we used to work there sometimes. Yeah, so when a bus would arrive in, the Americans would get off and we'd sell them anything that looked Irish. Knitted donkeys and Aran jumpers and leprechaun keyrings. But again, learning the art of you have to work. It's part of life. But also, there was a guy lived a few doors down from my cousins called Jerry McInerney. And Jerry was a famous Galway hurler. Famous because he had white boots. This was back in the 80s. And he used to bring us up to the hurling field in Kinvara and teach us to play hurling.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And those school days, what was in your head sitting in the classroom, looking out the window?
I would have been accused once or twice of checking my split ends during English class. I had an awful mop of hair on me.
Worse than mine.
A proper fringe. And at the time, people remember the bowl cut as well, the undercut. I'd hate to think what it'd look like now. Yeah, I mean, there were things I loved in school and there were things that I detested in school, subjects-wise. I loved English, I loved geography, loved art, didn't like maths, didn't like any of the sciences really, certainly the physics, chemistry stuff. Just my brain didn't work that way. My brain was probably more in the creative side, and hence I've ended up in a sector that requires some level of creativity.
Yeah, huge amount,
Yeah, so I liked it. I liked school. I probably, had a good bunch of friends there, played sport, played football, which in the school I went to in Cavan was really important. It got you out of trouble if you were in trouble, if you were one of the footballers, the usual. And great experiences as well, going up to the north of Ireland. So we'd play schools up in the north of Ireland.
Were you handy?
Yeah, I probably was. I was blind as a bat though. And it was too late in the day when I discovered contact lenses. So when I went to university and I was tugging out for the freshers, that was fine because that was daytime training. When I started tugging out with the seniors, that was nighttime training. And I had to give it up after about a month because I couldn't see the ball in the dark.
Oh my God.
And all I needed was contact lenses. Yeah. So I could have been amazing. I could have, as my dad used to say to me, I could have played for Cavan. If only I'd had contact lenses. And also if only it was probably something as well that at a point in time I was kind of given a choice once between working to help me stay in college, or it was an ultimatum, or training with the local club. And I was in college and I chose work.
Yeah. So your choice about college, was that motivated by a career direction, or
No, I would say not. I'd say I made the mistake a lot of 18-year-olds make when they're filling out their CEO. I really didn't know where I was going, what I wanted to do. I ended up going to what's now LIT in Limerick, studying marketing management and foreign trade, but really just wasn't enjoying it. And it took me forever to get home from Limerick because there wasn't the same transport links. So in fairness to my mum and dad...
There's no train from Limerick to Cavan, no?
No, there isn't. No, there isn't even a train from Dublin to Cavan or from anywhere to Cavan. So in fairness, my mum and dad, I remember just saying to them I wasn't happy. And so I made a pivot and went to Maynooth. And because again, I wasn't sure where I wanted to be or wanted to go, I just ended up picking an arts degree.
Yeah.
And there's all the jokes about people with arts degrees back then, but now, a lot of people, I hear them talking about, if you're undecided, look at arts or look at business degrees, look at a general degree, because actually you have to have a lot more discipline around those because it's not taught learning, whereas a lot of the kind of more specific qualifications would be learned about what is in the book. Whereas arts, it kind of allowed you to have your own opinions and think in your own way. Yeah, but plus just the discipline. I mean, the discipline of getting up and going to college and, doing a bit of study and a bit of study, that's a good grounding too for people.
Yeah, and did you take summer jobs and stuff?
Oh, I did. Yeah, I had lots of them. I worked in a factory that made wall insulation. I injected baby chicks in a hatchery. And I worked in a hospital for 2 summers. I worked as a ward attendant. So my first job, the first night I went into the hospital, I was working across the night. Now, I wouldn't have known now what I would have known then, but I was asked to sit with a man, an elderly man who was wearing an incontinence nappy. And when I think about it now, they actually had him tied with light bandages to the bed because he was always trying to pull this incontinence nappy off him. And my job was to sit with him for the night and to not have him do that and just to mind him. But now I would know that patient had dementia, Alzheimer's. The way he was restrained was out of order then and certainly would not be tolerated now.
And I'm sure at one level it was a practical solution to
totally
a very precise problem. Not a great solution, but it was a practical solution.
Yeah. I mean, so that was my first night. The funniest memory I have from a summer job was in the same hospital. I was given the job once to prep a patient for surgery, a male patient. And I remember what they used to do for you so you could prep somebody was to give you a single blade razor and a bottle of talcum powder. And I remember the horror in the guy's face when he saw me coming at his nether regions with a single blade razor. I'd say he had rash, whatever about his operation. I'd say he had rash for a few weeks. And I remember saying to him, "Have you ever been prepped for an operation before?" And he said, "No, never." And I said, "Well, you're grand, because this is my first time doing one," which didn't help. Didn't help him, but
and even taking a role like that, could that just have easily been a job in the local centre packing shelves? Was that just a case of getting work, or? Because I'm guessing there's a lot of people just would not have even dreamt of doing a role like that?
It was probably because it came up as an opportunity, but I probably enjoyed it to a point where when I was leaving Limerick and deciding what I was going to do next, one of the career choices that I had seriously looked at and actually had been accepted was nursing, which when I look back now...
It's not too late, Micheál.
No. I just don't think the uniform would look good on me. So that was at that time. So, I mean, there was, thinking about it now, there was probably something in me that was choosing this path. And even when I went to university, I studied sociology. And that was what my interest was in. It was never about my second subject. And even to the point of my first job was nearly working as a community welfare officer, except I chose then to go work in the not-for-profit sector. So, yeah, at some point in my life, I probably went somewhere within me, decided it was more the social side of things than the commercial, or not saying commercial, because what we do is commercially minded and driven by commerce and figures and budgets and all those kind of things. But yeah, certainly the not-for-profit side or the social side was where I was heading.
And who were you learning from? Who were your mentors? Who were the people who were influencing you?
I don't really know. I remember there was one lecturer in university in Maynooth who was one of our sociology lecturers, a guy called Gerard McGrail. He would have told us that he lived at the bottom of Crowpatrick in a house with no electricity. And funnily enough, even though we knew that, we still bought him a lamp as his going away present. So I don't know what he did with the lamp. He might still have it. I don't really know. I'm not sure. It just may have been somewhere within me. As I said, I certainly, from a work ethic perspective, that's from my parents. I grew up with that. I saw that. I had no issues with people not being at home when we all knew the kind of, or maybe didn't even realise until now, the commercial realities of running a house with 5 kids back in the 80s and 90s. My wife Claire was actually telling me a story recently, which I didn't know, was when I was going back to college on a Sunday evening, my mum would give me probably £20, and that would clear out the house for the week. And I never realised that, so then you have to think back and go, did I spend that €20 wisely, or was I totally irresponsible with it? I look at that sacrifice as well. So, even now when you look at what you're doing within your own house and are you making the right decisions, you have to look to that and say, well, when those decisions were made for me, they helped me to get to where I am. So, they may probably now be driving decisions that you make as a dad.
So that decision then to go non-profit, was that just an ad you saw and you responded to, or were you deliberately looking for that at that stage?
It was an ad, I think. I wasn't really sure at that stage. So that would have been, so that was 96. I would have been 22, 23. I genuinely didn't know what I was going off to do. I had spent a couple of summers, or I'd spent a summer in America, pouring concrete and doing all that aircraft work. Certainly didn't want that to be my future. So I don't really know. First job was with ISPCC, and I was there for about 2 years, and then I went to Special Olympics for about a year.
Your role in ISPCC, was that fundraising?
Yeah, so I was what we would kind of call now a community fundraiser, somebody out driving around, engaging with people in the community who were running events, doing table quizzes. The most famous location I ever used to go to was the pub. That was a real pub that was the pub in Glenroe.
Okay.
So they used to do a table quiz every year. So, that was the most famous place.
And was that duck to water from your point of view, or?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. It's funny, people who are, I look at and I think, I actually couldn't do your job, are people who do cold calling. So people in call centres, I have a lot of praise for them, because cold calling is a difficult thing to do. What we were doing was maybe more where we had a relationship. So taking it from somewhere and building it. That piece that's duck to water stuff. So yeah, I think it was. And then just that little bit of opportunity to be creative. And even some campaigns you come up with back then, they're still being used now. Or parts of things that you were fed into back then, you can still see them being used today.
Yeah, and in terms of a skill set, what were you kind of discovering in terms of connecting with people? What was working?
I think being authentic.
Personal?
Yeah, just being real and being yourself. Just being normal and ordinary. A lot of people sometimes pretend and play a role, and, I just think people see through that. So I just think you're yourself, and, if that's not right for somebody, then that's not right. And it's just the way the world is. Not everybody's going to get on or connect or to click. But yeah, I just think I was kind of, that ability to keep relationships was probably something that I found I was able to do.
And I think you were with them so 10 years, we bar a little spell with Special Olympics, and you ended up being director of fundraising there.
I did, yeah. Two of those years, so 4 years, 2 of them based in Dublin.
Yeah.
And then we made a decision to move. So apologies to people in Cork. We made a decision to move to Limerick because my wife is from Limerick, from a place called Hospital. So we moved to there, and I spent 2 years then.
You're surrounded by hospitals.
24/7. I'm in hospital. I actually said that to somebody last week that said, where'd you come from? And I said, hospital. And they went, are you all right? And that's like not the joke, that's the fact. But 2 of those 4 years then I spent between the ISPCC office in Limerick and the ISPCC office in Dublin. So I was on the train a couple of times a week, hopping on it at Limerick Junction after the people from Cork had filled the seats up and you're, standing for 2 hours. But that was just becoming difficult. We had our first kid, second on the way, second then was born, and you're just missing chunks of weeks. And then back in 2007, early 2007, somebody in their wisdom and the mercy decided they wanted to set up a foundation, saw the job advertised, went for it. Pretty much knew coming out of the interview it was in the bag. I felt sorry for the guy who was sitting outside, and I don't mean that in a cocky way, I just knew it had gone well.
So in the ISPCC, obviously there's a big, clear, kind of concrete cause. You can explain it really, really clearly to people. Did you take that role personally? Did that cause become you for a while?
Oh, did you? Oh, I used to have debates about people. The idea of slapping kids and all that stuff. I would have had friends who were pro-slapping, and I would have had heated debates with them about why it wasn't right. I probably, do you know what? And one of the things, maybe you were talking a little bit earlier on about stuff that drives you. Probably thinking about it now, one of the things that I would say I experienced in secondary school was being bullied. And look, I know everybody says that, but look, my experience was I was, and here was an organisation, and one of its primary functions, as well as delivering services like Childline, it was very strong on anti-bullying. It had every year we would run a campaign with schools, we'd go out and we'd do school talks. So, I think I probably bought into that, so that was the piece of that organisation's work that I identified with that drove me. Yeah,
and you have to buy into it, don't you?
You have to personally invest in it.
Yeah. Or else you really are working.
You have to buy into the part. We talk now a lot more about if we're looking for someone to support the foundation's work for the hospital, it's more about linking in with our mission. It's not just, and I know this might sound crass, it's not about the money. There's more value in somebody buying into what we're trying to achieve in terms of our purpose or our values. And if that's financially, then that's how they want to do it. Other people become advocates or, volunteer or, run a marathon. But some people connect with us on that level, the mission, values or purpose level. And they're the people that have a deeper relationship and who you can have more impact with over time.
Yeah, and actually it's funny how things connected you. I did a really good podcast with Micheál. He's the co-founder of the Indie Cork Film Festival. And for him as well, these instances in school of being bullied, and it wasn't him, he said it was a particular kid who used to get leathered. So it made a huge impact on him, and he ended up kind of working with children for a number of years, volunteering for exactly that reason.
Yeah.
Because these things affect all of us. It's amazing. So you moved from there then, and there was a bit of geography involved in this role with the Mercy. So from moving to something with a very clear purpose, and I know we've had this conversation too, funding for a hospital, and you're into this whole balancing thing of, well, shouldn't the state be doing all that stuff? And here you are now raising money. And why do you need money? And is that just getting someone off the hook that should be doing it anyway? So I think in particular with that idea, there's a bit of a conflict. Would you resolve that for me?
So this is a hot topic at the moment.
Yeah, but I presume it always is. And obviously you need that clarity when you go about your work.
You do. So to give you an example of maybe where the tensions in a positive way exist. In any hospital that has a foundation, in Ireland or in the States or anywhere, you have a hospital that has an economic requirement and needs money. You have a foundation that has raised money. But mostly what has happened is the donor has given it for a specific purpose. Yeah. And we absolutely 100% stand over that. So once it's reasonable for a service that exists, sometimes people want to give to projects that we don't have. And we have to say to them, we don't have those projects. and you send them somewhere else. Now, you could take the money and not be transparent, and that would be wrong.
Use it for your own purpose.
Yeah, and that would be just. Now, sometimes people give us money and they say, use it for what you see as the best need. Other people would say, give it to the children's ward or to the oncology.
Yeah, and again, for anyone who's listening who may not be familiar with the Mercy Hospital, will you give a quick overview? Is that we call it the People's Hospital in Cork?
When people ask me how to get into the Mercy, I tell them if they're coming from Dublin, drive along the river, cross the river at some point, and drive down past the bend in the river and the original building, and then all the other buildings are there in front of them. So it's not city centre, but it's still within the city bounds. It's 160 years old as an institution. The original part was the Mansion House, which was built for the Lord Mayor, and then it was gifted. It passed through a number of hands. It became a school. Then it was given to the Mercy Nuns, who, bizarrely enough, not far from where we are on South Mall, originally they got on a boat in Dublin and took the canals down. You know, again, people may not know a lot of Cork City. The streets were canals back a couple of 100 years ago, and they got off their boat and they started looking after the sick. So cholera was a huge issue with cholera. So then those nuns were providing that service, putting themselves at risk, a lot of them dying from cholera. And the building was gifted to the nuns. So they opened it on St. Patrick's Day of 1857. I think they had 4 or 5 patients came through the doors on the first day. And actually there's the original patient log sits in one of the rooms within the hospital and talks about the patient and where they come from.
Because the original model was going to the patient, wasn't it?
Yeah, and a lot of the patients, people that the Mercy nuns would have gone to in Cork were the people that were in the slums, who were in really dire poverty. So they were seeing the poorest of the poor. And to this day, the hospital still has as part of its mission to, look after people regardless.
That isn't just a giveaway statement.
Absolutely. I mean, you see the influx of private hospitals in the country, and people who are lucky enough to be able to afford to pay their health insurance or work for a company that provides them health insurance. They have access to private hospitals. But there are people who don't and who need access to really good care in a hospital that they can go to and can get access to. And some of the best, and I don't think we say it enough, some of the best surgeons and doctors in the country in certain specialties work in the Mercy, without a shadow of a doubt, people who are leaders in their field. So the hospital is 300 and odd beds, 130,000 patients a year pass through the place, a mix of patients who are inpatient, so stay in a bed, people who are outpatients who would come in and out, maybe once a week for an appointment, and a mix of specialties from paediatrics through to oncology, ward for older patients, medical wards, cardiology, pretty much the full remit, except women's health and breast cancer, most of the other specialisms. And it's also one of the designated centres in the country for bowel screen. So if a patient receives the kit from the new bowel screen programme, they're coming in for a follow-up, then they're coming to the Mercy, which is a really amazing programme. And it's just a pity more people who get the kits in the post don't take advantage of it, because it can show up an early diagnosis or it can enable an earlier diagnosis of a bowel cancer. An old hospital in terms of part of it infrastructurally, exciting plans for the future, really amazing staff, an ethos of care that exists and will continue to exist into the future, what we call the Mercy ethos or the Mercy way, and that's there, and hopefully that will remain. So
and so where does the state stop, and where does Micheál Sheridan and his gang kick in?
I think we look to be, do you call it the icing on the cake or the sugar in the tea? So there are things that are provided that are to the level at which is standard, if that makes sense. So it's good enough, and it's what's required at the time. And what we sometimes do is we say, we can help you to do better. So to give you an example, a few years back we were raising money for 2 CT scanners for the hospital. And an opportunity came up with the company who ended up providing the CT scanners to provide new software add-ons that weren't in existence anywhere else. And we were able to make that possible. So now the CTs were able to do more than they could have done if we hadn't been part of the plan to bring them in. One of the projects that we fund at the moment, and we will be funding, I would say, for a number of years yet, is a service which we call the POON service. So if you're a child in Cork who's diagnosed with cancer, you first of all go to Crumlin and you spend some time in Crumlin after you've been diagnosed. Then the Mercy would have a shared care arrangement with Crumlin. So children from this part of the world, then their ongoing care would then be in the Mercy. And a number of these children require regular medical interventions, bloods, needle procedures. And there's two options. The children and their mum or dad can come into hospital once a week or once a fortnight or once a month, have to take a day off school, take a day off work, fill the car with diesel, park somewhere in the hospital or close to the hospital. And as a child then have all the anxieties of coming into hospital, big place, bright lights, strange people. But what the Poon service does is it offers a service where two nurses, Peg and Olga, get in their cars in the morning and drive to these children at their houses. So what it means is these kids are in their own environment. Mum or dad may not have to take a day off work. The child may not have to take a day off school, or certainly can be home and go back to school, whatever way it works out. And we worked it out in 2017, that service, which costs us, we fund it to the tune of about €30,000 per annum, and that just keeps it on the road. So HSE pay for the nurse salaries, we pay for the mobile element of the service. But last year, there was 700 less times that those kids needed to come into hospital. When you work that out, then it's 700 less trips to hospital, 700 more days in school, 700 more days in work. 700 less trips, round trips from Bantry. So there is a service that exists, so these children could come into hospital and have this service, and that would work. But the idea and the opportunity to be able to say, look, being a kid and being sick with cancer is enough to deal with, and being a mum or dad of a kid who's very sick is enough to deal with, and you also have sons and daughters who are there too, and there is an impact on them if people are gone all the time, where that service says, you stay at home, we'll come to you. So that's a service that we fund that has a real impact that we're really proud of, that's having a measurable impact. And that's a good example maybe of what we do that's not what state might do.
And I think as well, you do a lot of the small things. I remember you saying with the old codger who might come in, he's tripped outside and he needs to be cared for a while.
Yeah.
You actually bring them out and buy them pyjamas in Dunnes stores or whatever's required. So it's the big things and it's the small things.
Yeah.
So the state kind of looks after the service provision, but you're the things that, I suppose, in a way, look after the person and improving that wherever it can.
I think I saw somewhere recently, it was just a spinning circle, and it was mind, body, spirit. So the hospital does an amazing job at the body piece. The spirit piece is provided within the hospital by the chaplaincy, by the pastoral care team, and they do an amazing job at that. So for people who want to have conversations with the chaplains or with the chaplaincy at difficult times in their life, then that service exists. It's for anybody and everybody. The other piece we're starting to move into a little bit is in the mind piece. And part of that can be...
That's the health piece as well, isn't it? If the mind is better...
Absolutely.
You're setting the conditions for everyone improving.
Yeah, so we've bought pajamas.
Yeah.
We've bought toothbrushes. We also have a small fund that we administer through our social work department. So if a patient, let's say, to give you an example, a patient who's self-employed, who's the main earner in a household, who has maybe a wife or a husband and kids, and they have to stop working because they have a cancer diagnosis, and it's coming into winter, and they have to keep their house warm, and they have no money coming in. They have whatever they've coming in through social welfare, but not enough to put oil in their tank. So what we would do in some cases is we'd have an application from social work, and we just pre-approve a budget for the year with them, and then they just decide how it's best used. But we have put oil in tanks. We have given money to support people getting transported to hospital or to Dublin. We've paid for a taxi within a child who needs to get to Crumlin quickly. We've paid for a train ticket with parents and the child, or a taxi. You put yourself in the place of the person at that moment in time. They have cancer and their house is cold and their kids are freezing and they have no money coming in. What would you want? You'd want oil in your tank. My kid is sick and I need to get to Dublin quickly, but I can't afford a taxi. So that's the small, but it has a really huge impact. You can imagine the impact that has on, if you're a parent and you're worried about your child's ill health and you need to get somewhere fast, but money is a burden or a barrier. Well, let's just take the barrier out of the way and let them get to Dublin.
So you identify the need, you fundraise to fulfill the need, and then you make sure that that need is fulfilled professionally and efficiently and I suppose cost effectively, the benefit of everyone, and obviously working very, very closely with the hospital and making sure that that happens. And so you've another big exciting project. I think that's, you fingers crossed that it might be there.
The centre?
Yeah. We're hoping to get a green light on planning, because I think you're nearly there with this process.
Yeah, we're nearly there. The key for us has always been with that facility was it was always more about the services within it than the building.
Yeah. So there's a new building that's pretty much next door to the hospital.
Yeah.
And what do you hope will happen from there?
So we hope to get our planning. We have some money raised already for it. The key for us with that centre...
That's from the people of Cork who believe in your cause.
Absolutely, yeah. And people who've experienced cancer themselves, or who want to pay it forward effectively. The key thing with the centre is where it's located. It's located right beside our outpatients department, where most cancer patients that are coming to the hospital on an ongoing basis are coming to. So it's about 10 steps away. It's about 30 steps away from a car park. It's very accessible in terms of bus routes out to Ballincollig and to the city centre. And it's purpose built.
What services would be delivered from there?
The first thing is providing people with a space and a place to come.
Okay.
If that's just between appointments or waiting for an appointment, they can come in, sit down, have a cup of tea, just get away from everything. If it's after an appointment and they're a bit tired and they're waiting for somebody to collect them, they come in and sit with us. If they want to access some support, the primary service we'll be providing, and we've been piloting for about 6-8 months very successfully, and we've now plans to expand that service as a new psycho-oncology service. So one of the big focus in the new National Cancer Strategy is the whole area of the psychology of cancer, the impact on your mental health, the impact of being a survivor actually. People who have been told they're cancer-free but who live in fear of the cancer recurring. And look, cancer can recur, that's a reality. So looking at how we can provide psychological support to cancer patients. We hear stories about, guys in their late 30s diagnosed with testicular cancer. They have a wife and children. They're terrified. They're having panic attacks. They need psychological support, psychological intervention. So to provide that service on a full-time basis would cost about €80,000 a year. And it's a service we're 100% committed to. We're just trying to phase it in. We're trying to match donations with being able to provide the service. So if somebody rocked up to us in the morning and said, here's 80 grand a year for the next 5 years, we'd be providing the service full-time for the next 5 years. The other part of the service as well, and what we're looking to provide, is space for peer support meetings for people who've got similar cancers or have been through cancer or want to link in with a group. So we've one group running at the moment, people who've had esophagectomies, so what we call in kind of the medical terms upper GI, so esophageal or stomach cancers. So there's a group of patients who have been looked after by Mr. Tom Murphy, one of our surgeons, and the nurse who works with Tom, a lady called Louise Buckley, has put in place a kind of a patient support, peer support meeting. They meet every few months. One man who comes from County Clare every time the meeting's on, and every meeting they have different things they talk about. They'll have someone come in and talk about good mental health, somebody coming in and talk about diet. I know in the next few months they want to run yoga for a month. And what it's doing for that group of people is it's teaching them things that are important post-surgery, exercise, diet, but also it's teaching them about good mental health. But importantly too, it's connecting them into each other. And what's amazing is the first of those meetings we held, it was a group of maybe 40 or 50 patients and their partners or sons or daughters or siblings who were there. This was last December, we had a kind of a Christmas get-together for them. And everybody was in great spirits. And then Tom Murphy walked into the room, and I know Tom really well, and Tom's probably in his early 40s, an amazing surgeon, spends 8-9 hours in operating theatres. And when he walked in, there was just this natural kind of outpouring of appreciation. I mean, people stood up and applauded and wanted selfies with Tom. And it wasn't because Tom was looking for them, it was just that these people...
He's their rock star,
I
presume.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he fundamentally changed their life, saved their life, changed their life. Therefore, what we know is that patients can flourish post-surgery if they have a network of support. And that old phrase, I can imagine what that felt like. If you haven't been in that situation, you don't know.
And being in this situation, you're talking about a period in your life, and most of us hope we'll never be there. That's the most terrifying and petrifying and scary, and will I survive or not? And you're service provision is just trying to make that time a little bit more bearable for people. Okay, so and in the process, I think you were nearly there, but there were some objections or something. Like, the project behind schedule?
The project is behind schedule because we got planning granted to us by Cork City Council.
Yeah, when was that?
January. And then somebody who owns property nearby lodged an appeal to An Bord Pleanála. And the problem with An Bord Pleanála is they have a massive backlog at the moment for projects all over the country. So where are we at now? We're in October, and that was January. So, technically, if all had gone well, we'd have been ready to start in February. But here we are in October, and we're still waiting for news from An Bord Pleanála.
I suppose planning can be notoriously tricky and everything else.
Yeah, it can. And also it can be, I'm sure the decisions aren't made based on emotion. They're made based on matrices or calculations or lines on a map, or, they're not made on emotive. So the problem with being in that sort of a very structured process is, sometimes, they talk to people's hearts and minds. I don't know if we'll see if hearts come into it if it's all done on the basis of logic. Yeah,
and I'm sure you're being optimistic. You have faith in the process, and that we'll get green lights, and before you know it, what's your deadline? When do you think, all things going well, would be providing these services?
So we know that it's probably a 60-week build.
Okay.
But this was a building that we were going to build from the ground up. So demolishing what's there and building up a brand new building, an amazing building.
So December 2019 maybe?
Probably, yeah, all going to plan.
You'll be looking after people?
Yeah, that's the plan. But as I say, the commitment is always to, even in the waiting, we've started up some of the services.
Yeah.
Because the priority for us is always about the service. The building is an amazing add-on and is really important. Kind of the environment piece of that, the location piece of it is really key to us. Yeah, but ultimately, I suppose the key for us is about the delivery of the service that we've committed to.
Yeah, and this is huge for the people of Cork and all of those people who are at their worst possible moment. So hopefully, God is good. We'll say our prayers, and maybe. So Micheál, this is one hell of a job. You're in this role now how long?
Some people see it as a negative. I'm in the job about 11 years.
Yeah, and I presume you don't have to look too hard to be motivated in this role.
No, I think probably in the early days. So when I started, I was literally given a desk and a chair and a phone and a best of luck. Not in so many words, but it was almost like create something. And probably in the early days, the focus was in the wrong place. And I remember one day walking into the hospital and a child or a young person came out the door and they had a mask over their face. So clearly they were immunocompromised. They were very sick. And it suddenly dawned on me that where we had been looking was the wrong place to look. The inspiration lay in the person that was coming out that door with the mask on their face who was very sick. So I think from that moment on, it clarified things for us, which was if we're buying a piece of hardware, something that you plug in, or you're putting a brick in the ground, it's about where that impacts on that person who's walking in or out the door of the hospital. So once we can tie it back to the patient, to the person, then it can be a building, it can be equipment, it can be an outreach service, it can be a dressing gown, a toothbrush, but it's about that individual. And the more individuals that we can then collectively, positively impact on, then we're doing our job, and then we're, doing what's right.
Okay. The idea of this podcast is win happy. That's the theme of it. And, for me, the purpose is in all of us, if we can kind of chisel out a life that has us winning, but with a smile on our face. I'm not talking kind of winning in a money sense, but winning in things that really reward you and, you can have a fulfilling life. Are you winning happy?
Yeah, I am. We have an amazing group of staff who work in the foundation who are totally committed to what we're about. In fact, today even, we were talking during the week and we made a decision that what we wanted to do was to set up a payroll giving scheme within the foundation to support a project or projects within the hospital. So we now have staff in the foundation who are donating to projects in the hospital. And I think the reason that we made that decision was, it was a great phrase that an American lady used a few weeks ago, and I've now taken it and I'm going to use it, is, it proves that we have moxie for our mission. So it's my new hashtag.
Moxie.
Yeah, moxie. But I think it sums it up. I even had to look just to be sure that I was using the right word. I made sure I got the proper urban definition of it. But I think for us to go out to look for donors to support us and give us financial support, whether that's €5 or €5,000, it's difficult to ask people for money, and if then they turn around and say, and do you support your own organisation? And now we have, and we do, so we have a team who are really great. We've new people joining us recently. It's really good for us just to have new people come in as well and bring fresh ideas. Certainly lower the age profile as well at the foundation. But I think as well, if you find, we have all these projects that are very long-term projects. So historically, we have picked a number of projects and championed them for about 3 years. Normally about 4 projects. And we have worked very hard to support those projects over the 3 or 4 years. I think probably what we will do now to get quicker wins, we will probably pull that time frame back and pick a project every 12 months. So we'll champion a project for 12 months, go out and deliver that project, celebrate it, move on. Because when you're in a 3 or a 5 year cycle, it's not as easy sometimes to celebrate the wins, and then you have to try and create opportunities for those.
Yeah, because I presume you need even that little bit of feedback for yourselves about the work that you're doing. But the question is, are you winning happy?
I would say so, yeah. I have a good life. We've married to Claire. We sometimes are like ships in the night certainly on a Wednesday evening when the kids have, 5 things on between 6 and 9.
I mean, the future leaders you're talking about.
Well, yeah. I mean, so my eldest son is very much about social justice, and we have a plan for him, which we've talked about.
How old is he?
He'll be 14 in January. But recently we were talking about what he wanted to be and what he wanted to do when he grew up, and honestly he said he wanted to be Taoiseach. I kind of believe him. It's not like
Hey, we heard it here first on the
exactly,
Future Win Happy podcast.
So we've put a plan together. I told him you don't start politics as a career. Yeah. You find a career first and then start politics.
What's his name?
Éanna. Éanna.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Right.
I'm trying to figure out when that'll be.
Yeah. I know we need to work out. It's not president, you said. That might be a bit further on, but Taoiseach, that's okay.
Yeah, but I'll give you an example. I mean, and again, going back to your point earlier, one of the things we talked about earlier was calling as you see it. So he's 14, and I think he's a great example to a lot of people. And look, my kids, Rian is 12, and Finn is 8, and Caelan is 3. And they're all brilliant kids. And they all have their talents. But just to give you an example, so there was a situation about a week or two ago in school where a kid got suspended and was accused of doing something. And a kid who probably would never do anything wrong got suspended for doing something that he was alleged that had happened. And Éanna went round and he asked everybody that he knew was in that space at that time had something happened. And they all said no, they had seen nothing. So we went down to the year head and knocked on our door of our office and said, I've talked to people in the class and nobody saw anything. And what happened in the days afterwards, other kids from that class went down and said that they had seen nothing either. So in fact, nothing had happened. So this young guy hadn't done what he was accused of being doing and was back in school. And, I was trying to explain to him, leadership is about not having to bring people with you. It's about people following. And what I just saw in him was, and he didn't know he was doing this, he just did it, was he set an example. He called it out. He saw, he saw an injustice being done. He said, nah, not happy with that. At the age of 13, he said, I'm going to fix that. And off he went. So I just think, there's a great example there of, lots of us are afraid to call it and people suffer. So I think we talked way back this afternoon about, if you see it and you're not happy with it, you call it. Because otherwise, nothing gets done.
Or else keep your head down. That's nothing to do with me. You keep out of it. Don't speak up.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that happening, So I think and maybe those conversations around the kitchen table that we're talking about, maybe he's heard more than one of those, Micheál, and it's rubbed off somewhere. So the one last thing I have for you is, I need to ask you what your superpower is. And that's that thing that, be it in work situation or at home, that we need Micheál for this. This is the thing that Micheál brings to the party. What is that thing? That special thing you bring?
I think it's probably kind of, not saying seeing I can see the other end. Some people, there's a problem and they get bogged down in the first barrier in front of them. I probably go to the far end and see the solution and then try and work through the barriers. Now I'm learning that sometimes it doesn't make sense just to put your head down and plow through all of them, because you created it. You bring nobody with you. You have no allies as you're going. But I think that's something I'm learning to do. But I do think that I just see the solution to the problem. Now sometimes we might never get there, but you have to try. I think for me that's it. I just think I maybe get bigger picture stuff. And also sometimes then I have sidekicks with me who have the skills to like Batman and Robin.
You look to the end and you figure out the path and you bring people along with you.
Yeah, and I think sometimes as well, the path you choose might not be the right way there, and I think you have to be prepared sometimes to deviate off. I think at the end of the day, if you keep your end goal in mind, sometimes you might have to take a few lefts and rights and turn back and go again. I mean, I've certainly experienced that, with some projects, but I think that's, I think that I'm able to do that. Whether I'm able to do it well or not, that's for other people to judge.
Well, Micheál, you work in a really challenging sector, and I think I know you really well. I think of all the people I've dealt with in the sector, you're definitely one of the most professional I've come across, and it is a sector that requires a lot of professionalism. But I think part of the magic behind all that is that you do take it personally. So listen, keep taking it personally and resist. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you.
Cheers,
Pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Win Happy podcast, which has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to send me an email at greg@fusion.ie. So until next time, take it easy.